Naturally, the crypto shakeout will continue into the following day, ladies and gentlemen. For the past 48 hours or so, we have been selling off and basically correcting. Additionally, we can observe that cryptocurrency has become red on a weekly basis. Many individuals are now beginning to panic a little bit over this, but I want you all to know that it's acceptable to be worried if you're new to this area or if this is your first cycle. It's acceptable to worry. I am aware that a prevalent adage in the cryptocurrency space is to avoid letting your feelings influence your investments. Nevertheless, money is money, isn't it? There will always be a small element of emotion involved regardless of how much money we invest in something. However, I want everyone to understand that if this is your first cycle, you will have no feelings at all about this game by the time you enter the next cryptocurrency cycle. And the reason for this is that you are aware of and truly comprehend what occurs in the midst of the cycle, which is that there are pullbacks and corrections along the road. These are all done to increase liquidity and to shake away weak hands. And I realize that sounds awful to say because once more, a lot of people do get shook out of their emotions, or perhaps they're afraid and in a bit of a panic. However, I want you all to understand that the shakeout usually occurs just prior to the cycle's biggest advance. This also occurred in 2020, correct? Into January and into December. We witnessed a significant loss of your old coins. Another excellent illustration of this is XRP. However, it happened in November and December of 2020. The old coins were sort of abandoned by everyone. Then in January 2021, ancient coins suddenly became popular. Additionally, that is where we get the Dogecoin mania and all that sort of stuff because Dogecoin was also going crazy at that time. However, as of right now, we are at 117k in the sea of red. Bitcoin did experience a 1.7% decline today compared to previous week. It has dropped by nearly 3%. In fact, Ethereum is up both daily and weekly, while XRP is down 3.7% and down roughly 13.9% on the weekly. Stellar is also down there, down roughly 3.2% to 14.8% on a weekly basis. XRP 9.4, HBAR 4.2%, and 15.9% on a weekly basis. Once more, they are not minor setbacks, but they are also not cause for great alarm. For instance, certain antique coins are still down more than 50% on the annual basis. To put it another way, XRP is still up more than 400% annually in comparison to where some of these older coins are currently at. XRP was up 371% and XLM was up 306%. HBAR is up more than 26% as well. When comparing our current situation to any of the moves that have occurred over the past week or so, I firmly believe that we are in a favorable position at the moment, particularly with regard to many of these older coins. Therefore, I don't think we should worry too much, but let's review a few points. Let's take action and deal with the situation. Everyone is constantly curious as to why we are experiencing this sell-off in the cryptocurrency space, as in what's really happening. And really, the most important thing in all of this is to just reset the mood, isn't that right? I believe that the market has now been totally reset and it may continue for a few more days. It's completely acceptable if it continues until next week. The most important thing though is to avoid being swayed before the final significant impulsive wave on the altcoin market, as it will be the biggest wave for altcoins. However, as we can see, let me confirm that this is current. The 3.83 trillion cryptocurrency market valuation has dropped to about 66 due to fear and greed. At roughly 37 out of 100, the altcoin season index is currently in place. As a result, antique coins are actually beginning to take a back seat. And exactly like we've been discussing for the past several days, we're beginning to observe that the dominance shift is moving to Ethereum and Bitcoin. Since I do believe that we are in phase 2, the most important thing here is to keep an eye on Ethereum. In my opinion, we are just beginning Ethereum's second phase, which is when we really start to see what the platform does next. Additionally, we briefly examine Ethereum dominance, or even Bitcoin plus Ethereum dominance, which is what we have been examining. However, with regard to XRP, XRP, XLM and all of them, the past 7 days have looked like this. We've lost roughly 13.73% on XRP over the past 7 days. To be honest with you guys, nothing is too weird. Because as I stated in my live stream from last night, 30 to 50% declines are generally considered normal when considering old coins that are still in the middle of a bull run. And I am aware that some people may find that frightening because once more, in traditional finance, we don't have moves like that unless everything is going to go up. But in the end, it's all about cryptocurrency volatility, isn't it? For example, we invested in cryptocurrency due of its wild upward movements. However, if we don't also join when we see those crazy moves to the downside, we won't be able to receive those amazing moves to the upside. However, XLM and XRP are in a very similar situation, about 15% less than the previous 7 days. Cs have also decreased by almost 10% over the past 7 days. Naturally, HBAR has also decreased by over 16% over the past 7 days. And as I'll discuss in a moment, we did lose the 24-cent level. However, as you can imagine, this is difficult for ordinary investors or those who haven't been involved in cryptocurrency for 2 cycles or more, because these moves become routine once you get past that initial cycle. When you look at it, you don't really think, oh wow, look at this crazy drop to the downside, as in what's happening. Does the cycle end here? Are we about to enter the bear cycle, you know? No, I know that many people are worried, but this is just a shakeout that we need to sort of go through. However, this is the true appearance of the charts. The XRP chart is shown here. Once more, nothing significant has changed. The daily is this. It's likely that we will cut here. As I mentioned earlier, this is what we genuinely hope to see. We would like to see us construct a floor around these levels up here, and it's roughly in line with the demand back here from the highs in January of this year, but it's also roughly in line with the highs from March. Therefore, our goal is to truly construct a floor here, obtain a positive impulse and go upward before eventually breaking out and continuing upward. Therefore, it can take some time. I mention that because July has been so interesting. August would probably be a little dull. We began July back here when XRP was about $2 and we pumped all the way up to $3.70 throughout that time. As a result, we cannot claim that July wasn't exciting. However, moving forward, I do believe that in August we may simply level out around these highs before we get that major impulse that moves into, say, September. Because once more, I anticipate that the Fed will actually lower rates in September. I do believe that September will be a significant month. Furthermore, I genuinely believe that things will be somewhat similar back here. It was still quite thrilling in 2024, for example, even into July. We experienced those fluctuations from less than 40 cents to roughly 60 cents and nearly 70 cents by the end of July. After that, August was rather dull until September, of course. September made a pleasant small improvement. Following that, October and November were largely bearish until, of course, the elections, when things really took off. However, based on these outdated currency charts, I don't believe we need to consolidate for 2 months or something like. I believe that we will likely just chop a little bit for a week or two, and then we will likely have that pleasant impulsive wave in the future. However, even XLM is rather comparable. Here we're in the demand zone. Before things, cascade to the downside, I would really like for us to keep the support zones that we established back here. I would therefore be well advised to keep an eye on XLM for any indications of life at about 39 cents. As long as we begin to create a floor around that region and avoid a downward cascade like we had back here, it's okay if we do wick down to those highs where we do have the liquidity wicks, which is around 37.5 cents. We're approaching those zones, so we're absolutely keeping an eye on XLM here as well. It goes without saying that each bar at HBAR lost 24 cents. The primary issue with 24 cents was just keeping these highs. However, I hope that we are able to sustain a higher low here. Therefore, I do not want us to lose this wick on July 15th. Is it really that vital for us to keep that up now? Not precisely. And to be honest, we do have a fair value differential below that level on a daily basis. This amounts to about 20 cents, 1 penny, or 20